Hello, everybody. This is the Lord.
All right, so everyone, Dan Atkins.
Well, I guess like most of you have probably bought a bike. So I recognize a lot of faces here. Liz Tigan there got a Triumph from me in about 1983 that we custom built for her. And it's almost like a reunion of part of our cycling club with all of these folks here. I'm delighted to see everybody. I think Verona Historical Society has done a great job having Jesse here because he is the very energetic.
Keep the mic a little closer.
So anyway, I thought, well, before I go just into the history of the bike shop, which I know you guys are all waiting with bated breath, I would give just a little background on myself and how I got into the whole bike thing to begin with. But basically, I have two brothers. We were born into the bicycle business. I found this just looking around things at home. I don't know if there's a way to show that, but when my dad and grandfather started their first shop, March 1st, 1955, they canvassed the then west side of Madison, which went all the way out to like maybe Odana Road, and put little things in people's mailboxes. It was talk about their grand opening. And what they didn't say was that they also plowed snow in the winter and skidded logs out of the woods, because you don't have anything to do in the bike business in the winter. But that was cool to come across that, because that is one of the original, it's in terrible shape, but it's one of the original pieces of paper they put in people's mailboxes. So I turned out to be a third generation. You have those.
Oh, sure. Hey, don't mess with that.
Well, yeah, because it really started out in 1955.
By the way, just to prove a legitimate.
I only have a couple pictures, so this is going to go nuts here, folks.
I want to prove that's my daughter getting a bike from Nan this March. So there's several of your bikes in our garage too, so this is personal for me as well.
Yeah, this year was an interesting year because we didn't have any bikes. The used bike sales were way up. That's the 1722 Monroe Street, just almost across the street from Trader Joe's, down Monroe Street. That was a big day when they got their first kind of neon sign there. But that was in front of my dad and grandfather's shop. My dad was just out of the Korean thing. He was in the Air Force, and they got a little GI Bill, and he and his dad decided the west side of Madison needed a bicycle shop. There's a couple classic Schwinn's in the window. And that's actually what the original, if you can imagine it, the original building is actually the right half of that. To even work in there, they had to take everything out onto the street so that they could get in and work. And then they doubled their size by putting the second half. So it actually became like 24 feet wide. And then they prospered and did well, and eventually this is where the Chalet Ski and Patio building is. They built that structure after quite a bike boom in the 1970s. This goes back the other direction. That was their first total concept store, which was well written up in Madison. That was down the Southwest Commuter Trail. Goes right behind that, was the art house glass building and stuff later on. But they built what was one of the first total concept Schwinn cycleries in the United States. So they became a pretty large operation. And that's the inside of that store. So that was their first really big move into a lot more bikes. And it's my grandfather. Oh, cool. Grandpa Willie. He has stories all of his own. I could go on for about an hour about him. He was a character. And that's kind of, yeah, that's, again, that's enough. That shop had, it was pretty cool. There's, and I don't know if anybody can see that. This is, the railroad line is where the commuter trail is, and that was right behind the place on Verona Road up there. And then, I don't know.
Well, I'll put these up on the table if you guys want to see them afterwards.
Well, that's kind of cool. Anyway, the Schwinn people took those pictures. That's my twin brother. Well, let's see which one's me, right? That's me. My twin brother, grandfather, my dad's brother, and my mom and my dad. And that was basically what the inside of a Total Concept store looked like. And that was about the same time we sold this, which Larry Gunlaw was nice enough to bring over and show. That's a Schwinn Little Chick, genuine whole original little bike. So it was those were quite the days, the Schwinn days. And there's one that dug at me on unicycles, which I still ride, incidentally. And that's kind of enough of that. That was like just kind of where we were coming from. Had to get permission from Schwinn to use their name. It was Atkins Schwinn Cyclery. Anyway, what happened after a degree of prosperity there, they moved out to the big shop on where Chalet Ski and Patio is, and they kind of lost interest in the bike business. And they wound up, I was working with them, and they wound up selling the family business to Hacks, which a lot of you would probably remember the Hacks name. And that's a whole other history thing too. I could take that from the day Frank Hack started to the day he sold in 1968 to the guy that bought my dad's shop. But they kept the Hack's name. Eventually got bought out by Williamson Bicycle Works, and everybody went belly up. So to get to Verona then, in about 1976, my twin brother and I were the only ones in the family that were really into bicycling. The rest of the family was like, it was a business. So whenever anybody came into the shop that was a biking enthusiast, they would grab Doug and me because they didn't want to talk to him. And one of those people, and I can't give enough credit, but one of those people who was a bike enthusiast was the man who owned Verona Lumber. And any of the older folks here will know this. That was Paul McQuillan. Previously, a woman had owned it, Verona Lumber, before Paul. But Paul was one of those enthusiasts that came in, and everybody except for Doug and me went running to the back room. So I befriended Paul McQuillan, and we basically, after that, had like a lifelong membership. Well, friendship. But anyway, Paul, my family sold the family business out. I was a manager at that time. We had opened stores at both Middleton on Schwinn's bequest as well as on State Street. And Hacks bought that franchise out. So I was without a job. And after not a whole lot of discussion, some running around to Chicago and back and doing some airplane things, because I am a pilot, and I decided I didn't want to fly for a living, but that's a whole other story too. Paul and I agreed that it would be nice to have Verona have a bicycle shop. And I give I love the guy dearly, and he's long gone now, but he and Alice, who was a teacher here in Verona forever, co-signed for my first loan because the Bank of Verona would not give me a loan. And we bought our first batch of inventory, and I went looking for a place to open my shop. So the first 2 years were on Highway 69, on what is now Bruce Street. Then it was 2278 Highway 69. And what was the building where they manufactured pre-stressed concrete beams. It was owned by Leif Alexander at that time, who had a company called American Transit, where they had these little red cars that drove picked up and delivered bank documents throughout the southern part of the state. That was before computer stuff. That's how bank documents got back and forth. So that was quite the time. And I don't know if I have any. The first store, actually, I found a few pictures at home, and they were so poor that you just have to imagine. It's just, I rented about a 20 by 20 4-foot section of this building from the American Transit people, put a sign up out front, advertised a bunch in the Verona Press, and there was Atkins Bike Shop, you know, my first shop. That was an interesting time, and I had a lot of support from local community. If you look, you have to go into the paper archives, but there were a lot of little things in Verona Press over the years. So that was 1983, 1984. Then during those winters, and I got the pleasure of working extra jobs, and I got to drive a courier car, like a few local Verona people drove for those guys. I delivered bank documents for 5 hours in the morning before I went to work. At so 2 years down there, I thought, well, I'm going to starve to death down here, so I better do something extra. At that time, everybody knows the Stoffel names. Dick Stoffel, who was working with the Bank of Verona, was one of my clients. And he said, well, Henry Raleigh, this was, you know, I don't know how much, this is still 1984, 84, 85. Henry Raleigh, who owned Raleigh Sales and Service, which was a lawn and garden tractor kind of place, is where now the Harris Bank is. So Dick Stoffel came in and he said, hey, you know, I think he could use a renter, because apparently he was behind on his payments. So if anybody knew Hank Raleigh, he was a character. So I went up and talked to Hank, and he said, yeah, I'll rent you half the building here. So in 85, then I moved up to 610 West Verona Avenue and redid kind of the inside of Hank's. Is this good for you? Okay. Okay. Did the inside of Hank's shop and split the lawn and garden place with the bike shop. And being up on Verona Road then, which was the only road through town, there was a lot of exposure. Hank had this little gravel parking lot. It was, you know, it wasn't super deluxe, but it was good enough. And so we did well there, and we started doing like Raleigh bicycles and Takara bicycles, and those were my third and fourth years in Verona. You know, one of the fun, Hank was just a kind of curmudgeonly old guy, and I don't know if anybody would remember Herm Daniels, who was a police officer. And Herm's son actually worked for me, and actually, I really don't want to go into that story too much. But anyway, Hank did pass away a couple of years later, and unfortunately, Herm was the first one on the scene, and he was supposed to give mouth to mouth. It was like, you didn't want to do that with Hank. One of my memories, a good memory from that story would be one time, you know, I was still pretty young, and I had a van with my name on it, and I came spinning into the parking lot, and I'm sure Hank was inside just having a fit as I threw a rock through the window at the front of the building from my spinning tires. Anyway, I'm sure Hank was happy to see unbeknownst to Hank, I was working on the building across the street, which is where my current location is. And I'm sure Hank was happy to get me out of there. So those were the first 4 years, and I know you guys are all riveted with this. If anybody has any questions, please feel free to ask. Then what happened was pretty fortunate. The man that had owned Town and Country Ford Tractor and his wife, that was Ron Taylor, and another man named Tom Bailey's owned the properties up there. And Ron wanted to, they thought it would be cool that they had the property for sale, and they thought it'd be cool to build me a little bike shop. So while I'm getting out of Hank's shop, they started digging across the street. We got written up in the Verona Press on that, and it was, you know, they had us all out there with their shovels. But they built that building for me with an option to purchase it. And I, was really thankful for their, like with Paul McQuillan and Ron Taylor, they were willing to take a chance on, a young guy who was trying to operate a bike business. So that happened in '87, and we got the building built and moved in there, and had kind of a grand opening, and that was this one you'll have to, but the Verona Press actually did come out and take a couple pictures of me. So that was kind of cool.
Who's that guy holding the pen there?
Yeah, that's a young guy with the dark hair, you mean? Yeah. Yeah, I know what happened. You blinked and it's 40 years later.
I'll put it up there too.
So the current store then was built with the Hayes Building Corporation, which became Cleary. And I guess not much. I was in the town of Verona at that point. They didn't need much for permits or anything. I don't know. But they got me set up, and we started operating out of that. And then it became kind of a legitimate business. I only had to work one job during the winters for the first several years there, and then I was able to actually start just doing things like bike guys normally do in the winter, which is like rebuild wheels, rebuild used bikes, and take vacations. So that was the start of what's been going on now. And then at about that same time, I had my first of my 4 kids, and really it was pretty great because I was kind of a stay-at-work dad. So I raised my kids at the shop. So people would come in and they would see these like kids in tricycles like doing circles around the place, and it was quite the unconventional. I'd have at that time it was still pretty weird for guys to be taking care of their kids. So I'd have moms would come in, they would love this. They would say, "Oh, that is so great." Guys would come in and think, "What the hell are you doing?" So that was that era went until about '94, and then in '94 I actually did an addition onto the shop. The first one that, let's see who did that one. That was that one being a WIC building. So I got, however, they took care of all the permitting and all that stuff, and we actually needed more warehouse space, and it had been kind of a slow growth. So that was like '94. So they built, we built on and did the same thing now that we've done more recently. Just this last year, we converted our shop to showroom, and our old warehouse to a shop area, and then had a warehouse built on. And I just did that exact same thing now, just this last year with Cleary. So it was Cleary, WIC, Cleary, and that's what exists now. The hoops you have to jump through now are quite a lot more than what they used to be. It was interesting. It took me a year to do the permitting, and then we finally got the project underway. So at this point, the place is doing well, except we can't get bicycles. And my middle daughter, I have a son and 3 daughters. My middle daughter's decided to work in the business with me after doing a degree in graphic design, and decided she didn't want to sit in front of a computer. So that's kind of a nutshell of it. Over the years, there's been a lot of affiliations with Verona businesses and stuff, and I wanted to bring this because this was one of our claims to fame that Larry Gunlaw did for us. Back when Lance Armstrong was not unpopular, Larry found him and got him to take a picture with our club jersey. So that was kind of cool. And we had the bike racing team off and on for about 20 years as well. This was Larry's second attempt, incidentally. It was the night before. Lance didn't want to have anything to do with him, and then he finally cornered him. So we thought that was pretty cool. And through the years, I sponsored racing clubs. That's what I got on now. And then that was one that we had a variety of sponsors, including a beer sponsor. Well, that's kind of what I got for you, folks. It's, again, to reiterate, Paul McQuillan wouldn't have happened without Paul and Alice. And, it was hard to see those guys pass on. But now we're doing very well, and you just don't have to be afraid to work.
Dan, if I could start the question and answer part, I have to have you talk about two things. One is pandemic year as a bike shop, because you told me about this when I was in your shop about how weird this year was. If you could walk us through how that year started and where it went, because you mentioned that you can't get bikes. I'd love to hear how this year unfolded. And then you said this is the worst we've had it since 1970 or whatever. If you could mention what was happening in the industry then, and then just walk us through your last year. I think for historical record, it'd be really cool to hear your memories of this last year.
Okay, well, actually, the pandemic was it started 2020, of course, and it went nuts. We sold everything we had. It was great, I think what happened in the bike industry actually is a lot of guys sold their inventory, said, great time to get out of the business. And across the nation, there was quite a bit of attrition in bicycle dealers. For us, it was our best year ever because we sold 2020, because we sold everything we had. But then we couldn't replace it. So this year we had a booming drop in bicycle sales of 80%. And fortunately, we just tightened our belts and fixed a lot of used bikes for folks. But people were pulling old Schwinn's out of the rafters, and we're seeing stuff that my dad sold back in the 70s, 60s and 70s, that we did a lot of renovations on. So we did well just on doing service work for this year. So, but that's just the way it was. And for across almost every industry, availability of parts and product is just dismal. My twin brother's trying to build a house right now. They waited like 5 months on windows. So it's that kind of, I think, I'm not saying poor me, it's like poor everybody as far as that stuff's concerned. But that was the pandemic had that kind of effect. What happened back in 1968 through about 72 was a bicycle boom. I'm old enough to remember that. And that was, they had gas price things, and there was kind of a resurgence in people wanting to be fit and do exercise. Jogging started becoming popular, and so there was, in fact, a bicycle boom. The fun part about that actually was that we would have an entire rail car shipment full of Schwinn's sold before they ever got to the back door. And so that was quite the era. It was hard to believe you had, like it had happened now this year, where we actually had to have a waiting list for people to get a bike. I had kind of a picture of one of our warehouse things here, though, that was kind of the back of that building on Verona Road. We would run a set of rollers out to the rail car, and they would roll them into the place. But this would be a typical picture of, just bikes on top of bikes, and we'd have every one of those sold before they ever got to the back door. I have not been that fortunate, but it was quite a time. And then after that, and I've been trying to tell my daughter this, is that you don't want to get too excited about it, because there's usually a post-boom depression. So we're not trying to overextend our inventories, with the thoughts that it's going to just keep booming and booming. But that was quite the time. It was there were not enough bikes. About 10 bike stores opened up in Madison. That was just about the time Trek started as well.
Guys, do you mind if we do question and answer? And I just want to mention that for me, your story was one of the few silver linings of the pandemic year, like, I was so worried about so many local businesses, but at least like, people were buying bikes, and it was nice to have that, like, little happy story, at least something to look at that was positive, so that's why I wanted you to talk about
Yeah, it's
that.
been pretty great. I mean, we don't even advertise. People just come in, I'm afraid if I'd advertise, I wouldn't be able to handle it. I'm an advertiser's worst nightmare, incidentally. They come in, they go like, they want you to, well, we want to increase your sales. I'm going, well, geez, I don't think I can handle it.
So I'd love for question answers or memories of people who bought bikes from Dan in the past, because this is part of, I think, one of the best parts of being a small town. Here you go.
Dan, I appreciate the care you take of my recumbent. The thing I'm curious about is what, if any, impact did the Military Ridge Trail have for your business?
That is a good question, and it's something that I of course thought about, and because I've had people say, "Well, you want to be down on the bike trail," and for the most part, folks using the trail are already set up, and and they have their own shops or whatever. I can't say, apart from renting bicycles, which has been good for us, especially since the hotel moved in next door. People come and they see a bike shop, they go, hey, we can rent a bike. It has not been the impact that I think the developers and other people think. Now, could we cater to that more? Well, it's like throwing fuel on a fire for me. So I haven't really catered to that, but I don't think it has had the kind of effect that people generally think that it would. I think maybe towns like Sparta, Wisconsin, which is the self-proclaimed bicycling capital of the world, that's been a really good thing for towns like that just don't have a lot going on. But again, the overall impact is not, I think, what you may think it would be.
I forgot to ask, what's in your Bruce Street building right now, just so we can pinpoint it? Your Bruce Street building, is that N+1 coffee, or what's there?
Oh yeah, that's right. That was, I have only heard, I haven't gone in there. That was a car dealership, American Transit and me, or not a car dealership, but a car repair place when I was there. They really spiffed that up, and the guy has, I think, bought out the SBR people, or most of the share of their business, the swim, bike, run guys. I don't know how they do down there.
What part of the building were you in? Were you in the east half, the west half?
Right in the middle.
Right in the middle, okay.
Yeah, it was like, it was great. You had to know about it. Getting exposure, I think, was one of the best things that ever happened once we got up onto Verona Road. Some serious traffic going by. Highway 69, there'd be like it was just a gravel road back to that, and we had a bicycle on top of a sign that I had painted purple. It was like, I don't know.
Who else has questions? Here, we'll sweep across the room. Hey, Steve.
Dan, would you talk for a minute about the downfall of Schwinn? It went from the most amazing American bike. The 10-speed was advertised in everything from Boy's Life to I don't know what. And Paramount, Schwinn Paramount, which was a world-class racing bike, and I think they went to Waterford. And I think you still do business with them. But they just collapsed, they disappeared, they evaporated. And of course now they're back as a much lower price version.
Yeah, they're owned by a Canadian toy company now called Durrell Industries. All the Schwinn rights. I'm actually way overqualified to talk about that because my dad was a friend of Brownie Schwinn's. And Brownie was, well, God, how far do you go on this stuff, right? Brownie was the grandson of the founder of Schwinn Bicycle Company. But he was really an illegitimate kid, and he became a Schwinn because his grandfather adopted him. I mean, it's like crazy, but he was a good friend of my father's. So I got a lot of inside dope on that. But the long and short of it is that Schwinn was privately owned. The Schwinn family was not particularly liked by their employees. I think they could have done some better stuff there, but they did not stay up with the times. They were building bikes by the gazillions, in about 1970. Started outsourcing, had to start outsourcing a lot of stuff overseas, like a lot of manufacturers did. but they had internal labor issues, and they did not stay up. People wanted lighter, higher performance bikes. Schwinn built these super heavy-duty quality bikes, but they lost a huge market share by not staying up with their competition, and by the Schwinn family not being particularly well liked. The other thing that happened, of course, everybody's trying to get out of Illinois these days, right? But they were in Chicago, and their plant was there. They had a lot, it had been there since 1895, and in 1980, their employees joined the UAW, United Auto Workers, and the United Auto Workers, of course, right away said, hey, you got to strike, you got to get better benefits, more pay. They struck, Schwinn closed the factory down. And that was really the beginning of the end. They tried to reopen a factory in Greenville, Mississippi, and work with, well, they helped get Giant started in the United States, because the Giant made their Japanese bikes, their Schwinn Latours, Travelers, things like that from the early 70s. So by, with that combination of things, they in '92 they filed bankruptcy and never got it back. Eventually got sold to a European company that did some really cool things, actually. And I could, all the stuff I could just go on and on about. But they took some old patents and brought back the Schwinn, some Schwinn bikes with the fancy shock absorbers and the Schwinn Stingray and cool things like that. And that company was named Scott, was the company. Subsequently sold Schwinn to a group of American investors who weren't from the bike industry. And then they went down the toilet. And then Pacific Cycle wound up buying them. And that was, Pacific Cycle was started by the guy that imported bikes for TV Lenny. So it's like, God, it just goes on and on. And he sold that, his name was Chris Horning. And Chris Horning sold out then eventually to the Durrell Company, which is a Canadian toy manufacturer. But, Schwinn went down, kind of shot themselves in the foot, is kind of my opinion on it. And I could tell some stories about Brownie Schwinn and my dad, oh my God, but Brownie Schwinn was he had one arm, he had lost an arm in a motorcycle accident, and he was their goodwill ambassador, and he had this unlimited expense account. And holy moly, it was just like, well, Schwinn probably should have been tightening their belts a little bit at that time.
How about Schwinn Paramount?
Well, the Schwinn Paramount, for the bike enthusiasts in the crowd, which is, which I am one, of course, was their crown jewel for their production. And the Paramount was just their top of the line, hand-built cycle. They were just like works of art. And when Schwinn went into bankruptcy, the last remaining member of the Schwinn family, who was still in the bicycle business, Richard Schwinn, and I could do an hour on talking Paramounts, Richard Schwinn and Mark Miller bought the Paramount factory, which was in Waterford, Wisconsin at that time. Originally, Schwinn Paramounts were built in a special area that was located right in their factory on Costner Avenue in downtown Chicago. But they decided during the bike boom that they were selling enough of these that they wanted to increase production. So they moved all that stuff up to Waterford, Wisconsin. And the Schwinn Paramounts essentially became Waterford bikes. So if you really want a Schwinn, get a Waterford. Because it's actually a last remaining member of the Schwinn family that's producing bikes. And his son Tucker now is in the business with them.
Since I've got the microphone, one more question. I remember when TV Lenny was giving away, selling bikes by the ton. And as far as I know, every bike dealer just railed against it. But you said it was the best thing to happen. And I wonder if you could just talk about how that could possibly be the best thing to happen.
Yeah, I had a different perspective on that. But, like it or not, Lenny got a lot of people on bikes that just were not going to be on bikes. Hey, I got a TV. Wow, I got a bike with it. So a lot of people got bikes, and they unfortunately were very mediocre bikes. But I think a lot of people got on them and rode them a little bit and thought, hey, I'm going to get a good bike. Geez, I still see some of them. I mean, they were unsafe. You could not make them safe. It was unbelievable.
Oh, we have to ask, who had, raise your hand if you had a TV Lenny bike. Who had one? Mom, put your hand up. You had two. All right,
Yeah.
now who's had an Atkins bike? Put your hand up. Okay, you tripled it. Yeah, you tripled it.
Well, and that's how Chris Horning got started. He worked for Lenny, and he was the one that imported it. And he started the Pacific Cycle brand, which then he got into the Target stores and did very well. But so Lenny created now he's selling electric bikes for the fun of it, and we're fixing a lot of those.
Hi, I have a couple questions. I grew up in Verona, but then I moved to Madison. And I always wanted to ride the bicycle path. When the military, which you were one of the first places I came out to get my Schwinn bike. And I probably got 2 or 3 different bikes from you, and every time I came in, you were always so nice and always fixed my bike, and you were just wonderful to me. So I just wanted to let you know, thank you for that.
I could kiss you. Well, thanks. You never get tired of hearing that. That's been our mantra since day one, is to just treat people how you'd like to be treated when you go into a place, and that doesn't happen a lot. And for us, it's just like I get to hear that, and that just warms my heart.
What kind of bikes, what's your big seller now out here?
What kind of bikes?
Yes.
Well, oh God, guys, mainly I sell I sell the Waterford bikes, which is the Wisconsin-made thing. But mainly we sell a brand called Specialized, which was started by a guy in California in 1974, and they just got bigger than Trek as far as overall sales. But they're a quality bike. They still believe in dealers and taking care of, doing a good job of taking care of their dealers and protect them. Even a little guy like me, now we have Eric's Bike Shop in Madison, which has about 40 stores, and they're the largest Specialized dealer in the United States. But they treat me like, yeah, you got Verona. So they're a wonderful company to work with. The luxury I've had being in Verona was I could handle whatever brand I wanted. And so I've been able to be very choosy about what brand I have. And at this point, I feel that those guys are as good or better than anybody, and I especially like the way they take care of us. Trek became kind of unfortunately, because Trek's in Wisconsin. I knew the guys. I sold the guys that started Trek bikes for his twin daughters when I was on State Street back in the 70s. I liked the people that started Trek, but they did not wind up. They got kind of ousted by the folks that have Trek now. But Trek does not treat guys like me very well. They want to tell you what you're doing. Kind of an independent lot. The few independent bicycle dealers that are left, and they want to tell you how to do things. And I don't respond well to that. I do respond well to Verona's code stuff, though.
Randy's got a question.
No, just a little history. At 12 years old, I got my first 3-speed bike from your dad down on Monroe Street there in your little shop, and you were a little 4 or 5-year-old rud rat.
Randy, you must be really old.
And I just bought a Specialized from you here about a year and a half ago. Some woman had ordered it and decided she didn't want it. And you didn't have any bites around it. And that happened to be exactly what I was looking for. And
Yeah, that's one of the rare cases too. It's like every once in a while you shouldn't get lucky to get a bike. You should be able to just get what you want. But
quite a history, though.
that's how it's been. Yeah, how about that? Huh? It's pretty crazy. What was kind of fun is my twin brother and I did. We started working on bikes for my dad and grandfather when we were 8 years old, And we were pretty good. They taught us how to rebuild 3-speed hubs and, you know, the things of the era. And people would come in and they'd see these two little, you know, the same guy, you know, working on their stuff, and it really freaked them out. And we had the twin thing. We had a lot of fun because once in a while, one guy would be one place and the other guy would be the other. And then, you know, one guy would disappear, the other guy would instantly appear around the next corner. So it was a fun thing in the shop, seeing people's reactions and the fact that there were two of you.
Can you talk to me about e-bikes? I'm never been a bike enthusiast, but once a couple years ago when we got our e-bikes, you know, us old people can't go up those hills without that assist, but they're great, and we got so many nice bike trails. My question is, do you service stuff that comes from TV Lenny?
Oh, heck yeah. We love those guys. Because service is not in their name, you know. Yeah, the e-bikes, I think, just very briefly, the e-bike thing is great. I think it's gotten a lot of folks on bikes who wouldn't be on bikes, and folks that wouldn't go out and go to places where you have hills and stuff, or if it's windy or whatever, you can get out on the bike and really enjoy it. So I'm an advocate of the e-bikes. Just one personal experience on Easter Sunday, I rode my regular bike to work. Well, actually, I wasn't working, but I rode my regular bike. It was like 22 miles. I thought, what the heck, I'm going to try one of those e-bikes, you know, when I turned around and went home. And it was really fun. So, you know, regardless, you can work as hard as you want, but you don't, you know, you can get up the hills, as you know, then. It's pretty cool.
Dan, what percentage of your bikes of your sales this year right now are e-bikes versus regular bikes?
Oh, well, when you figure not too long it was 0.
Yeah.
I did wait on the e-bike thing long enough to make sure that our company specialized had a quality product. So I didn't start handling their bikes until about 10 years after they were introduced, because I didn't want to have anything we were having problems with. At this point, and it's going to go up, and it's already accounting worldwide. It's already accounting for more than half of their sales, of their entire bike sales. For us, it's more like 20%.
Where do you think it's going to be 10 and 50 years from now? We're recording this so we can check it.
I just want to be around. I would say, geez, the darn things are really practical, and it's just a much wider market. These jocks riding around on their bikes. So I'd say it's easily going to be 50%. You know, you still want to be out. I know you're going to still have folks that want to go out there and go underneath the motor or whatever. But and in the northern climates, of course, it's cold in the winter, so you know you're not going to have them as much for like commuters and stuff like I think you would in the south.
Maybe underneath like 90 past. You ever see that kind
I guess shut off your phone didn't mean anything.
I don't think so. You know, I think that the joy of bicycling is having a simple, lightweight, fun thing to machine, and that really bonds you with the bike. And it's a little bit harder to do that when you're pedaling a 40 or 50 pound bike, like an old Schwinn. Yeah. Anybody else, any thoughts? You want to share any?
Questions or memories? Here you go.
I've just got a question for you. You said you couldn't get bikes, and I was wondering if you're doing Specialized, are they made in the United States? And if so, why can't you get them then? You don't have a bunch of bikes sitting on a wharf or something in San Francisco.
So I don't hear very well, but that was like availability. You're talking like availability stuff?
Right.
Well, we got a few things going for us. I'm really small, and so the bigger bike dealers get stuff more so, but you know, it'd be nice if we could build stuff here, which we certainly have all the capability, the technology, and that. But you know, it's still at the case where, I've got, who used to think you'd pay $600 for a regular bike, right? If we had one built here, it'd be $2,600. So, we still are not, as Americans, we get paid well for what we do all the way across the board, factory workers on up. We just absolutely cannot compete. I've tried that actually with an American company that manufactured carbon fiber bikes up in Booth Bay, Maine on an old Air Force base. They were called Aegis bicycles. I thought, geez, they're American-made carbon fiber. These things are going to sell like crazy. But they cost a fair amount more than the Asian-made counterpart. And I still found that people were not, as a general rule, were not willing to pay the extra that would cost to have something made here. So we're at the mercy of availability, overseas. That's just a sad fact right now. I'd like to start a bike company, I can have. Young lady up here.
Oh, but yeah, who has this question? Oh, Laura. Good to see you, Laura.
In 1960, at your shop in the Mill Street, we bought a tricycle for our 4-year-old son. That was a great trike. We got our trays. Round and round.
It's 60, yeah. So do you remember my dad or my grandfather you would remember because he was bald as a cue ball, and he had these huge meat cutter's hand. He was a meat cutter by trade. He'd point at you. So you'd either remember this kind of grumpy old guy, or my father was a very handsome and very conscientious young man at that time. Pretty funny. Stories from my grandfather. Oh. He would come in. This is like we have all this inside stuff at home. We still have some of his, say a lot of his sayings, but he had these hands that were like mitts, and he'd point at you. So right away you're thinking, oh shit, do something. And he'd say, "What for you?" So now in my family, it's kind of a greeting thing. What for you? And my dad and uncle would just be mortified,
Great. Any other questions or memories to share with the group? Yeah. Oh, hey, Mike.
I don't have a lot of history. I didn't buy a bike from you in 1920 or something like that, but I can say as a complete bicycle nut, there's no better bike shop on the planet. I love going up to your shop. Service is second to none. I love it, Dan. Keep going.
Thanks.
Second, plus one that.
Well, thanks for listening to me, folks. I mean,
thank you, Dan.
The tangents I could go off on, would be crazy.
Allie says you don't normally talk like this. He said he doesn't normally do this. Get it on tape. So, did you have fun? Did you enjoy this?
Well, yeah, it was great.
Oh, good.
And you guys went to Jesse here. He's a god for the historical society. So.
And making me blush. You can't tell because I got the thing on.
So but it's been nice. Thank you guys all for listening.
Yeah.
I hope to be around Verona for another 20 years.